Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I'm your host, Andres Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers. You just missed the opening remark I normally put in the teaser because my power went out last week or this earlier today, and my electric company decided to wait right until the show started to try and call me to let me know about it. Our co-host is Patrick Minton, the NBA Geek. Give a shout out, Patrick.
Hey guys.
And our amazing producer is Brian Foster. You can find his box score, Brian. Say hey, Brian.
How's it going, Dre? Great to talk to you, as always, on a Monday, and Patrick as well.
Awesome. All right. I actually feel a little sad for our audience because we had a fantastic pre-show. Patrick, I may make you repeat some of the stuff you said because it was great. Our show this week is going to be on the Nuggets loss of Ty Lawson. Stadiums, which will always get us infuriated, and actually a fantastic movie called Trainwreck that I keep putting an adjective in front of. So anyway, that's our show. I actually want to talk a little bit about last week's show, Patrick, because I have to actually disagree with the survey I put up, even though...
I haven't been checking in on the survey. How has the survey gone?
Okay, so last week's show, we talked women's sports, and of course, Serena Williams came up, and I, being the person that has clearly not been looking at the stats of women's tennis, said Serena Wimbledon. Serena Williams.
She might as well be Serena Wimbledon.
Hell yeah!
That's
all
a
right.
good new nickname.
But I said Serena Williams, clearly the most dominant female tennis player ever, and that was not true. I want to clear up. She has been very dominant for a good long time, and that is impressive. But you immediately fired back, as you should, Steffi Graf. And in a sport where count the rings counts, obviously you can't discount that run where she just like racked up 20 Grand Slam wins in a very short period of time that will never be matched. Like that.
And retired early.
Yes.
Like she could have won several more.
So I agree. So basically, our commenters agree that Serena Williams is a better tennis player, but I've got to say that's recency bias. I think there's arguments to be made for both. But I think at the very least, until Serena takes, Grand Slam 23?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's only a matter of time before Serena eclipses her.
Well, she is really impressive. So I've got a follow-up story. This is kind of sad about last week's show. We were talking SportsCenter and how little they cover women's sports. I actually have on my desk a little SportsCenter trivia calendar that asks all sorts of random questions. And I said, hey, I'll look through this to see how much it talks about women's sports. Out of over 150 little trivia things remaining, I actually tore it all apart. It ended up only having 6 questions about women's sports to the other 150 questions it had. It had more questions on the Olympics and not like specific things. I'm talking about like what city was the Olympics in this year held in kind of question.
Mm-hmm.
It had more questions on that than women's sports. But of the 6 questions on women's sports, 2 of them, the answer was Serena Williams. So
if we're gonna do some sports, some women's sports anecdotes, I have a great one. So I'm at work today, and my fiance texts me, we're going to a Storm game tomorrow, and she's like, okay, I'll go get a T-shirt or something. So she's downtown in Seattle. She visited 4 different sports stores, all of which are like, they're not just like, generic Nike or whatever, like actual Seattle team sports stores where that's like the marketing of, we are a store that will sell you merchandise about teams in Seattle. 4 stores, none of them have any Storms merchandise. All of them have Sonics merchandise, even though the Sonics don't fucking play anymore. And she's just like, what the hell? Why can't I buy a Storm jersey? I'm like, I'm 500 meters from the stadium in a store that's supposed to sell Seattle team merchandise, and I can't buy a Storm jersey.
This is going to make me feel so sad, so I'll make sure to get the link up in the show. And this is from Jessica Luther again. She was the one who hat tip to her for showing the link, which I can't remember. But there was a fantastic article on this very point that you made, which is people will say, well, why the market clearly doesn't want to support women's sports. I was high. I'm actually really happy. Good job, commenters. I made a comment last week where I said we'd probably get 3 annoying sexist comments after we went on our rant about women's sports because we're privileged males. We're not going to get yelled at for it. Only had 2. But one of the BS comments we
Only
got
for our audience.
yeah, good job. But one of the BS comments I got was, women are half the population. If women's sports were really going to be successful, they should just pay to watch them more. It's on them. And this article Jessica Luther brought up had the exact same point you did, which is to say World Cup is huge right now. Okay, I'm going to go to the FIFA website and look for the jersey. It wasn't an American player, but it was like the top international player at the World Cup. I want to buy their jersey. And they couldn't find it at the FIFA store. So what you're saying, it drives me nuts that people will say it's on you to support it. If they don't sell it, you can't support it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I mean, I would buy some Storm merchandise if there were any like readily available. When I go to the stadium, I'm not gonna buy it there. I don't it's the same for men's stuff. Like you go to the stadium and you're gonna pay like a 50% markup on some crappy T-shirt. Like I'm not gonna do it, right? I could get one online. I could see Brian actually Googling for it right now. I could totally get one online.
We have got the Seattle.
I bought
Go
these
ahead.
tickets like yesterday, and my fiance, she likes basketball because I like basketball. She's not really into basketball, so there's like it's not like she would have thought like ages ago to buy a Seattle Storm jersey. She just wants to buy one because we're going to a game, and she's like, it'd be cool to wear one to the game. Like, isn't that the market that a team sports shop in Seattle should be trying to market to? I mean, and one that's in downtown Seattle, like
Yeah, you want
within
to
walking distance of Key Arena, you'd think they should maybe say, hey, wow, there's one that Brian's looking at right now that looks really good too. I like that S on it.
Pretty good looking jerseys on this page. Good.
Yeah, sorry to distract the viewers who cannot see this yet, but you will in the show notes. Sorry, you will later when the show is live, right? Or am I wrong? Can they see this now, Brian?
Oh yeah,
see
no,
it right
we
now.
are.
We are speaking.
Yeah.
So this one, scroll down again. Scroll down again.
Which one do you like?
I like the one. Yeah, this one like sort of dark gold, but almost looks like a superhero shirt, right? With the
Oh yeah.
Storm thing on top.
It's not a bad logo,
It's
Storm.
it's a good logo, and I like the color. But I don't like that like crappy other yellow. I like the more goldish yellow. But that's just me, I guess.
Yes, and so here's our advice to people in Seattle: maybe stock one. Like again, we're not asking for mate. That's what bugged me about last week's show and the feed. I got a little bit of pushback. I don't know if you were watching me on Twitter yesterday, Patrick. I got some arguments. It's like when something makes up like less than 5% of something, and you ask for a 10% increase in it, you were asking for such a small amount. And in this case, you're like, how about instead of no jerseys, go to one jersey?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having the stupid team that left your city and you still act like was a big deal, although that's
okay. I will say Sonic's merchandise is hot here because it's retro, right?
oh,
Like,
I gotcha.
things that are retro are in now, but and Sonic's merchandise have always been pretty hot, and I think it's getting hotter, and it'll probably, as time goes on, keep getting even hotter. But still, like that's more of a fashion statement than it is a like sports memorabilia statement, if that makes any sense. Like I see tons of people walking around wearing Sonics gear that I am quite sure never watched a Sonics game while they actually were in the city, and almost certainly didn't watch in the last 2 years when they were terrible.
Well, you should. I have no problem with that. All right, I have no clever segue. If we had gone into the meat and potatoes, the stadium one, this would have been perfect. I'm going to be a true Nuggets homer and jump in the way and say I want to talk about Ty Lawson, who, one of my lines forever about the Nuggets has been I'm pessimistic about them, but as long as they got Lawson and Fareed, they got hope. They just lost Lawson. Now, to be fair, a lot of this has to do with the fact that Lawson just got his second DUI in 6 months, was feuding with the coach last year. I don't know how I feel too much about this. Brian and I were talking a little about this pre-show, Patrick, but the kind of, the culture fit shtick where if a player is really not getting along with the team and has some personal issues, the idea of trading them. Because I think we discussed the trade and we don't think it's a good one for the Nuggets. It's not fantastic. But what are your thoughts on that? I'm actually curious your thoughts on that. Like, should the Nuggets, with the issues Lawson was having, have traded him?
I'm going to go ahead and say yes, because, I mean, I think he's in the last year of his contract, or is it? No, it's 2 years left in his contract, and I mean, even with him, I don't think they're going anywhere. Now, you could argue that a better strategy would have been to keep Lawson and Fareed and dump all the crappy players like Wilson Chandler that they're paying crazy contracts to, and then just hire good players to play with
Now,
them.
I want to
Uh,
defend Wilson Chandler just a little bit, as just a general note about essentially the NBA, which is if you don't have a stock team, you basically need currency to get other players. And the way trades tend to work is if you don't have salary cap, you have to trade equal in value. And I do think that Wilson Chandler actually does have a decent perceived value on the market. Players like Draymond Green drive it up. I don't hate it for that. It's just the real judge I'm going to have of Wilson Chandler is, are they keeping him as an asset, or in a couple years if he's still on the roster, I'm going to say that was a horrible sign.
I think I'm going to tend to go towards the latter. I think Wilson Chandler is like a perfectly competent NBA player, but who's not great, and he doesn't do a lot of the things that that people like about Draymond Green. And I think the types of teams that are going to look for a guy in Draymond Green caliber are not going to take Wilson Chandler as a weak man substitute or poor man substitute. I don't think. I mean, I think paying 10, $11 million a year for a perfectly average NBA player is exactly how we got this label, the treadmill of mediocrity, which it's always pissed me off. The treadmill of mediocrity is not because you won 40 games. It's because you're paying fucking $11 million a year for perfectly average players when there are perfectly average players on the market available for like $3 million just, and everyone else is just like undervaluing them. So let Wilson Chandler go, grab yourself a perfectly average guy for $3 million off the market, and maybe you won't be stuck in the treadmill of mediocrity.
And by the way, I just looked at the Nuggets, and this makes me really sad. In terms of long-term deals, the only Wilson Chandler is going to be the worst on the books. They got Fareed through 2019 for nothing, which is a fantastic deal. They got Jameer Nelson for 3 years. He was ancient when he signed with us. I don't understand why we have him for $5 million a
Well,
year.
that one is like the last contract he signed with Orlando was baffling, which was that was like 4 or 5 years for 8 million a year, and even that one was baffling because like wow, he's going to be old when that's over, and that one expires, and then he signed him for 3 years. It's like, I mean, he's okay. Why not give him the Mo Williams treatment where it's 1 year at a time? What's wrong
I
with
agree.
1 year at a time? Like he's like, what is he like 34 right now?
He's
35?
going to be he's going to be 33 this season. He'll be 36 when the contract expires.
And they're
I don't
rebuilding, so what the fuck do they need a mid-30s player for? It
Well,
makes no
don't
sense.
forget, like Jameer Nelson got signed on right after Carl and Masai left, and all sorts of weirdness. I
Yeah.
think in terms of this trade, because yeah, that's you said the only 2 years left and has I mean, it's that's I hate that scenario, right? Because Ty Lawson is such a gifted player, and I'm I'm just going to shoot myself in the foot. I do this every year. I am really excited about him on Houston because if you look at him this last season, it was one of his worst shooting seasons ever, which
Yeah.
isn't hard to believe given that the Nuggets went from George
Well,
Karl.
and I think the alcohol
Yeah,
probably explains a lot of it, right?
that probably explains some. You don't have team wasn't as coached as well. I don't think it was as motivated, but he's going to Houston, which has been one of the best run offenses in a while. So I'm really excited to see what he can do, especially he's a great passer. So he's got James Harden, he's got Dwight Howard. I saw an article that listed these four players next to Ty Lawson. See which one you think doesn't belong, Patrick. Dwight Howard, James Harden, Trevor Ariza, Corey Brewer. I was like, you were really right. You had me really excited with three of those names, and you got the Corey Brewer. But no, I'm really excited to see what he can do in Houston. I think I don't have anything against Papa Nicolau. He seems like he was decent in his rookie year. He's on a fine contract, but anytime you trade a star for essentially a first to second round swap, as you mentioned, and one decent prospect, I'm not. That wasn't a great trade.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that the Nuggets are sending a second round pick back. So, I mean, that first round pick is good, but it would have been nicer if you could have kept your own second round pick too. What they
I'm really
essentially did,
surprised they couldn't like that.
I
That
mean,
seemed
what they essentially did is they moved up like 15 spots, right? If you look at where their second round pick is going to be, probably they moved up 15 to 20 spots, which, okay. But, um, and I don't know. I think I'm really excited about Houston next year too because I think the change of scenery will do good for Lawson, but honestly, they don't even need Lawson to be a superstar. They just need him to be above average. Give him some point guard production that that the team's been looking for a while. Um,
Well, I would
I
say
think it'll
they've
be. I think
had
it'll
like
be. And I'm also kind of, to be honest, another reason I'm high on Houston is I think Capella will continue to improve, and he'll be a really great player off the bench, and might even move into the starting role at power forward before the end of the year. So
that's
I,
and
I, I really like Houston.
that's been their only weakness. And I mean, they just strengthened. Like, it wasn't that they were bad at point guard; they just didn't have a great one. They now have a great point guard. And by the way, I actually want to, said it's kind of the off season. It's a fun time to branch out. We're going to be talking a movie in our third segment. One of the tropes that I kind of hate in movies is this idea of the substance abuser whose life falls apart. One of my favorite podcasts is the Cracked podcast. They actually talk about this, where your life is not in good shape if you're an addict. Let's I don't want to be in the boat of saying that. They go out of their way to say it on the show. But there are a lot of functional alcoholics or drug addicts. So on the one hand, I agree with you that it probably didn't help them, but on the other, like, it's also remarkable to look and be like, oh, this guy has alcohol problems and was playing basketball at that level.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a surprising number of them in the NBA as well, right?
I would buy, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons. I could buy that lifestyle, I could buy the pain, I could buy all sorts of stuff. I don't want to condone it. I just want to say I'm not shocked, but I don't know that I would love to see the numbers on that. I would love to see like legal substance abuse issues in the NBA.
And there's also a difference between, you know, go okay. This might maybe just make me sound like an alcoholic, but I feel like there's a difference between the guys who go out and drink a lot at night, they party a lot, they party hard, versus the guys who, we've heard stories of this, who are actually drinking during games and before games and stuff like that, right? Like, I think if you're drinking before games, uh, then you have big problems, and that's going to have big performance impacts. It's going to have bigger performance impacts than if you're just one of those guys who parties too hard and gets drunk too often, and you're up too late at night, and so you don't get sleep and you're hungover the next day. That's going to obviously be a factor too, but it's going to be a much, much, much bigger factor if you're the type of guy who's you know drinking, who's got like rum in the drink before, in shoot around and stuff like that.
And I mean, clearly the place it gets to, I don't want to go too much on this, but like the fact that he was clearly showing bad judgment in his drinking is kind of where you start getting the problem signs. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, there's
Yeah.
not a problem. A bunch of NBA players go out and drink. Like we have Uber. I'm saying we, even though I don't live there anymore. Denver has Uber and has actually really pretty good rates because it's not a big city. Like, it's not, if you look at like Los Angeles or New York, I've seen them, and it's like the amount of traffic in those places is ridiculous. So if you want to get from point A to point B, it takes a while and there's a lot of demand. Denver is a pretty easy place to get around, so it's just one of those bad judgment things. All
Yes,
right,
very bad judgment.
so
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I've got anything else to say on it. I mean, good job on Houston's part. I hate to see him go. It really sucks for the Nuggets to have this compounded with.
So, are you still a Denver Nuggets fan?
I really so I'm wearing a jersey, by the way, of fantasy sports. I kind of stopped being so much of a fan of basketball last year because it got really hard to watch it for me, because it's hard to watch when the impact of each game matters to you. And you
Hmm.
also, when you do fantasy sports, you kind of just stop caring as much about individual teams. Like, I found it hilarious when the very last year I was in the WinScore Fantasy League. Um, I had a day where if Dwayne Wade did well, my daily league did really well, but my season long league got hurt. I'd lose the season long game, but my daily games would go great. And I got crushed on the daily ones, and I just like shrugged my shoulders and said, I don't care. So I stopped caring about the Nuggets a lot, and I stopped even caring as much about specific teams. So it's funny, like, I was talking Greg Monroe, and I was remembering Greg Monroe from 2 seasons ago, and Ben Gulker pointed out to me, he's like, he played well last season. So it's like, oh yeah, you're right. So I haven't quite got on board with the Bucks. They need to be a little better. I made like a claim at the start. I was like, give me 2 seasons of playoffs and I'll be on board. So if they make the playoffs next season, I'll probably hop ship, especially since without Lawson. I mean, this season the Nuggets didn't make the playoffs with Lawson and Fareed. They're
Oh yeah,
not
no, they're
making the
going to be
playoffs this
terrible. They're going
season.
to be
I mean,
absolutely atrocious this year.
so
Like,
I'm probably off the Nuggets bandwagon unless something weird
I feel
happens.
bad for Mike Malone because, yeah, they're going to be horrible.
Well,
And
it
I
depends.
don't. I mean, I don't even know what Boudier is going to be. He might turn out to be a good NBA player, but they're going to be just horrific.
Well, even if he does, he's gonna. We've seen this, right? Most rookies aren't productive. Even the rookies that turn into productive, even for the rookies that turn into productive players, most of them aren't good their first season. So it's like, I
Yeah.
mean, you can bet on it. You could be like, I really hope he's good his rookie season. The best case scenario you could probably hope for is like, you know, close to 0 points over par, which I mean, essentially means if he's on a team of average players, you'd expect the game to end in a draw. So
Yeah.
that's not what I'm looking for.
I mean, yeah. There's usually one or two rookies every year that actually, have above average for NBA player production. Uh, I mean, and those players are usually not point guards. The Chris Pauls of the world and his rookie season, or those are exceptions, not rules.
Oh yeah, agreed. And like it should be worth noting that all the point guards you would say had a really good rookie season turned into be the best point guard ever, and that still leaves out like Stockton and Nash. So like Jason Kidd, Chris Paul, Magic Johnson, they
Well,
had
I mean, even guys like Kyrie Irving and Damian Lillard, like they had good rookie seasons where they were like where their production was on level of about an average veteran, which is very good for a rookie, but not, good in an absolute sense. Like Kyrie Irving's rookie season, he turned the ball over a lot, and Damian Lillard's rookie season, he did not shoot well anywhere other than beyond the arc. Um, so, I mean, there's it's just very, very unusual for a point guard to come in and actually be a very good above average point guard in the NBA. Not many players
yeah,
do.
and like I said, the ones that did it at a level that we would need, like if you're replacing Ty Lawson, the amount of production
Yeah.
you would have to put up has happened like 3 times in the history of the
Yeah, yeah,
NBA
he'd
with
need to
modern
have a rookie
stats.
season like Chris Paul's.
Yeah, Chris Paul, Magic Johnson, Jason Kidd. It's like I'm not holding my breath on that. This is
Yeah.
just the show of not good segues. So I'm actually going to take us to stadiums. What I will say is, missed you, Ty Lawson, but I'm kind of left too. So if you want to get traded to the Bucks, we can get back together. Actually, that's a perfect one. So I'm a not Milwaukee. I'm a Wisconsin resident now. Really more of a Badgers fan than a Bucks fan at this point. But damn it, local government here is pissing me off. I don't like Scott Walker. If you're from Wisconsin and you're watching the show and you like Scott Walker, I'm just going to say we might get along in a bar talking sports, but nothing else. I don't understand how you can like Scott Walker.
Mhm.
And this agreement they made for the stadium, I I just the fact that the big number that people are bringing out. So in Wisconsin, we agreed to basically pay $250 million to help fund a stadium for the Milwaukee Bucks, who have no business being in here. One of the pieces Devin Dignam and I wrote way back in the day was looking at data about where there should or should not be sports teams. And two places that got hit were actually Milwaukee and Denver. Denver, just because it's got room for a sports team, not four sports teams. Milwaukee has no business having a sports team. And the reality
Mhm.
is, if you were going to have a team in Wisconsin, you would need this miracle scenario of an amazing team that everybody in the state was on board with. And guess what? We already have that here. There's not room for two of those teams. Like the Packers are somewhat of an anomaly that exists because the entire state loves that team. Um,
Yeah.
we don't need a basketball team. So the fact that the NBA went out of their way to try and keep the team here, the fact that the city or the state gave them the money, and the other big story is the state cut $250 million to school funding, to college funding. So that's our state. We don't want people to learn, but we want a basketball team, and not even a very good. I mean, I'm really impressed with Jason Kidd. I'm really impressed with their offseason moves. I think at best we might get a 50-win basketball team that'll lose in round three to whoever the top team in the East is.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the Bucks owners have this ridiculous deal. Like it's literally a clause written into their contract that if they don't get a publicly funded arena, they have the right to sell the team back to the NBA at a $25 million profit. So, like, literally, the NBA sold them, or the NBA owners all approved a deal where the NBA owners all put themselves on the line They put their own money on the line saying, well, if you don't get a publicly funded arena, we will give you $25 million. That's basically what that contract says, which underscores A, how insanely confident everybody in the NBA was that the Bucks would get a publicly funded arena. B, um, it underscores really heavily like how much the NBA, all the owners, essentially collude with each other to enable scenarios like this. I mean, basically, the Bucks owners have been holding the threat of Seattle or some similar market over Milwaukee's head. They've been saying, well, if you don't give us this arena, we'll just sell it to the NBA for a $25 million profit because here in black and white, I have a contract that says I can do that. And they're just going to move it to Seattle or someplace else, right? And at this point, I mean, to a certain extent, that should be laughable because, for one, after the Bucks ownership, I'm pretty sure they bought the Bucks before like the new TV deal details were there and before it was clear how much the value of an NBA franchise has exploded. So they could sell today probably at a $100 million profit. So by selling back to the NBA for $25 million, they'd just be losing money. Um, and for another, like, Seattle has already kicked one owner out of town and said, sorry, we're actually not going to build you a new arena, so fuck off and take the team to Oklahoma if that's what you want to do. Seattle's already done that once, so it's likely Seattle could do that again, and I think it's one of the prime reasons we haven't gotten like wide deals like the one in Sacramento, etc., get turned down because the NBA doesn't really want a team in Seattle because having the market empty, to use it to threaten other teams with moving in order to get new arena deals is much better for the NBA than a slightly profitable NBA franchise in Seattle would be.
It's so maddening. And by the way, for anybody watching, you got to go watch the John Oliver piece. I'll include it in the links on stadiums
Yeah.
because it's just you can't. I looked this guy up. One of the owners is Mark Lazary. It was 2014, so I think the new deal was being settled, but it was before it was set in stone. But I mean that's such an easy like. If you're an analyst, because he's a hedge fund manager, like if you're just watching things, you're like, oh, their deal's set to expire. ESPN needs content. They're here, and yeah, we have Seattle. Like that, if you're someone who studies, like if you have the money to buy a team and study stuff, that would have been like the easiest no-brainer ever. And then then the NBA says, we'll give you 25 million if you can't sell it, you're just like, oh, okay. So you basically removed all risk. And
No, the clause is literally,
yeah,
they'll
I know.
give you 25 million if they can't get a publicly funded arena. It's
Exactly.
not we'll buy it if you can't find another buyer. It's we'll buy it if you can't get a publicly funded arena, which is an insane clause. Like the fact that they would put a clause like that in the contract should tell voters in Wisconsin everything they need to know about how basically they're being told to bend over by Scott Walker and a bunch of other billionaires. And it seems like the voters in Wisconsin are all saying, yep, I would really like to have that red hot poker shoved right up my ass. So let me bend over for you.
I, as you know, between the two of us, I tend to not be the one that uses harsh language, but I can't just like it is so maddening. And I talked to my dad.
Harsh enough for you? Did I make my standpoint clear enough?
Well,
here?
my dad's a lawyer, and he actually looked at some of the stuff with the Rams in St. Louis. And actually, by the way, St. Louis, you lucked out. That contract was horrible, and the fact that the team said, you know what, we're going to go pay for our own stadium in Los Angeles now. As John Oliver notes, yes, they're paying for the stadium on their own, but the city is putting aside land that they're not going to tax that is worth millions of dollars. So it's better. It's better than having the city fund it, but it's still not good because instead of saying, hey, pay for our stadiums and don't tax us, they're saying, hey, just don't tax us. But anyway, he looked at the contract, and essentially when cities sign these contracts to fund stadiums, it's so skewed because if I came up to you, Patrick, and said, hey, Patrick, I'd really love it if you could lend me $50,000. Likely you would say, you're a good friend, Dre. I have $50,000 to lend you. I'm just going to assume this hypothetical, but I'm going to give you a contract to sign. I'm going to have some conditionals. You're going to pay me back interest. You're going to agree to pay me back this much. Maybe you're going to offer some collateral, maybe your, car or computer or whatever. Fine. That makes sense. When cities agree to lend money to teams for stadiums, they have agreements like, oh, by the way, we'll give you the money to build the stadium. And if the stadium ever falls below a certain level, a bunch of stadium contracts have these agreements in them where basically say, if we fall below this level in terms of where the league is at in terms of technology, we will upgrade the stadium to that level. And that's what happened in St. Louis, by the way. Essentially, they agreed that they would keep the stadium in the top 10 in a bunch of categories. And the only way to do that would literally have been to gut the city and build where it was impossible to build. That's why St. Louis, the Rams stadium is getting moved. They were out of room to build a stadium that they agreed that they would pay for if the team stayed there. So like, it's actually like that's a good thing. Whereas other like John Oliver, he mentioned, I forget which team, there is a city that is agreeing to pay for a holographic projector when such technology becomes in existence for their team stadium. And this is fairly commonplace for cities.
I mean, if you watch the John Oliver video, there's like, this is hilarious because I'm not even sure which team that is in the video, but they're interviewing, the general manager of a team, or Brian Gumbel is interviewing a manager, and they're talking about all these provisions of what revenue the team gets to keep versus what revenue the city gets to keep, and it like all goes to the team. It's like, so not only does the team say, hey, we really want you to build this $400 million stadium, or we're going to move to Seattle. Oh, and by the way, also, you're going to build the stadium, but I'm going to keep all the revenue that we generate in the stadium. You don't mind, right? You're okay with that.
And they pointed this out. And by the way, a fantastic book about this exact phenomenon, Soccernomics, brings this up.
The Miami Marlins. I'm seeing it right now. That's okay. The Miami Marlins. The GM of the Marlins. And Gumbel's going through all this shit. He's like, the hot dog revenue? Yep, we keep that. Well, what about the soft drinks? Yep, we keep that. What about like everything? The peanuts, the popcorn, the soft drinks, the beer,
the naming rights. That was his big one. The Smoothie King Arena.
Rights, the Marlins keep it, not the city. The city that paid for the thing to be built. They don't get any of that. The Marlins get it. Because of course they do. They worked so hard for it.
I remember.
What about the fish tank in the end, Patrick? Do you think the city will end up with the fish tank?
I don't think the city even I bet the city didn't even own the fishes, and the city had to pay for the food that goes into that.
The fish tank is international waters. Is that what you're saying? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I bet it belongs to the team.
I remember when I was in Colorado right after the Broncos won 2 Super Bowls and got a new stadium funded. I remember being offended at the time that it was called Invest. I think it was, I don't know if it was called something else initially, but it's called Invesco Fields. It's like, we want a tax to get this new stadium. We won't even have the decency to name it after the city that paid for it. We're going to sell those rights off. So that's even more offensive, right? Give us the money to get the stadium. We're not even going to, we're not going to name it after you. We're not going to name it the Denver Taxpayers Stadium. We're going to name it Invesco Fields because we can make millions off that. So let's see. Okay. A few other points. Dave Barry, basically all the stuff we're talking about. He had a fantastic interview on MSNBC, sorry. And he actually, I liked the interview, and Dave did pretty good. What I will say is, it's always funny watching interviews where you can tell the interviewer has still drinking some of the Kool-Aid of mainstream. And so at one point, Dave asked him a question about why the owners think they deserve 50% of the money. And the guy just went on to the next question, which I thought was fantastic, because the guy's point was, if the players get just 50% of the revenue in the next CBA, if they hold firm, they've done well. And Dave said, well, they gave up 7% in the last CBA, and that's pretty ridiculous. Why would they think the owners deserve 50%? The guy didn't have an answer, but you could still tell he thought that way. But Dave, the quote I love that Dave that said in his original Vice Sports article, and he said again on this interview, is, with all of the advantages you get as a team owner, coming out and saying you are losing money should be an embarrassment. That would literally be like you, Patrick, saying, my team in the finals, it would be like the Golden State Warriors losing the finals after Kyrie Irving got injured, right? It looked like that briefly, but after Kyrie Irving got injured, if they had lost the finals, that would have been an embarrassing loss. They were already way better. They kicked off the best players on the other team. If they had lost that, it would be embarrassing. That's even more embarrassing. That would be less embarrassing than an NBA owner admitting they've lost money as a business person.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think we've spent enough time illustrating how that is completely false. That claim is totally ridiculous.
Yeah, and
Um,
Brian, if you want
like,
to bring up the quote from Jonathan Weiler, we bring him up. He was on the show last week. We love him. He had an article where there was an interview with former Blue Jays and former MLB president, and what he said. And my browser is stopping, but it was Paul Beeston said, "I can turn a $4 million profit into a $2 million loss and get every national accounting firm to agree with me."
yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty well-known fact about how all corporations work. I mean, corporations have certain abilities to decide when and where they want to take profits and losses, right? So it's it's not even unethical. It's pretty common practice to decide, for example, to that you want to take a heavier loss in year one, and then and make money in year two, and so you divide up the way you expense things, the way you allocate revenue. It's not even unethical. Now, what is unethical is to walk into meetings with a union and with a straight face try to claim that you're losing money when you're not losing money, because economic profit and accounting profit aren't the same thing. This is a pretty well-known fact by anyone who's taken a finance 101 course or an economics 101 course, that economic profit and accounting profit just aren't the same thing. So to walk into negotiations with a union and say we're losing money when you are in fact making money hand over fist, is pretty much the height of unethical um, negotiation, right? I mean, it's it's very hard to make any claims that you're negotiating in good faith when you open the arguments with these kinds of ridiculous claims. And frankly, uh, I would hope that now that the Players Association actually has like a talented lawyer working for them, as opposed to some
Derek
some
Fisher,
guy,
and who the
Billy
other guy,
Hunter.
Derek? Yeah,
Like,
whatever.
yeah.
Well, I will say the one issue, and we bring this up, and this kind of comes back to everything we've said about like billionaires versus cities and whatever, is the majority of the players can't wait because, watch the movie Broke if you haven't seen it. There's a lot of good stuff about the misconceptions people have about athletes, but you know, a billionaire can lose an entire season and it's not going to hurt their bottom line. They're not even going to blink. Whereas a player, if this is your revenue and you only get 5-6 years in the NBA to make all your money, and someone just says, I'm going to eat one of those years, it's gone. Not only is your money now gone, but your future revenue is gone. They can't afford to wait. So the real question, and I would love to see the players do it. It's an underdog story. Is can they avoid blinking? Because if the players can outweight the owners, they could get something back. But they traditionally have
Well,
not
I
shown the
think
ability
the
to.
problem that the players' union makes over and over and over and over and over again is they wait to be locked out from the owners, and the owners don't really give a shit about regular seasons games. That's not where the profits are. What the players need to do is they need to strike in the playoffs the year before, when the actual money will be taken out of owners' pockets if the players don't play.
And not just,
Right?
we've talked this before, but not just the profits, but for a lot of the owners, Malcolm Gladwell has a great article and talks about this being a psychic good. It's like owning a piece of art. If you are Steve Ballmer and your team has a chance to win a title, Steve Ballmer doesn't need any money. Steve Ballmer literally lights billions of dollars on fire. I read a fantastic article about how he bought like Nokia's headset division right before he left Microsoft or whatever. But Ballmer doesn't need money. A huge reason he bought this team is to say, I own a team, to be another Mark Cuban, to be able to go out and spend $100,000 on a party when they win a title. If he's got a really good team, which he does right now, and you say, hey, your team could win a title this year, but we're taking that year away from you, that's going to matter a heck of a lot more than, like you were saying to him, hey, guess what? No preseason for you. No first 2 months of the season for you. You're going to have to watch
Yeah.
just 50 games instead of 80 games this year. What do you think about that? By the way, I want to give a shout out to Ty Willinghans, who had a fantastic point. He's another Wisconsin resident, lives close to me, and he noted new arenas actually suck for taxpayers too, because we get a new fancy arena, and as you just pointed out, they upgrade everything and keep all the revenue. If you're a sports fan, this is horrible. Like, what I'm being told by this is that if I actually want to buy season tickets to the Bucks, the price just went up. How is that like? How is that a good thing? I basically agreed an increase on taxes and an increase on ticket prices. It's sorry, man.
Yeah.
I'm done ranting on stadiums. You'll hear more about it because it's in my state and it's stupid. Let's talk something fun, Patrick. We both saw Trainwreck, and here's what I love. My favorite scene in the movie was based on something in your life. Maybe not really, but it seemed like it. So
My life.
yeah, okay. So let's talk it. So my favorite scene in the movie, which I think every casual basketball fan
Oh
needs to
God.
watch. Even my wife said, I didn't realize how big LeBron James is. So Bill Hader is playing a game of pickup basketball against LeBron James. And LeBron James clearly isn't trying first off. But LeBron James, Bill Hader tries to dribble by him and he just swats the ball away. He tries to dribble around him. He steals it without trying. Bill Hader gets into a post up position. And guess what? LeBron James is so freaking big that Bill Hader can't even get a shot off. LeBron James blows by Bill Hader. At one point, Bill Hader's trying to push off LeBron, and LeBron James like shrugs, and Bill Hader falls over. And the end, I'm going to give a spoiler. So if you haven't seen Trainwreck, sorry to ruin one of the like 3 billion hilarious beats. There's other stuff to laugh at. But Bill Hader gets the ball inbounds and just decides to take a really long shot above LeBron James. It goes in, and then he's like, woo, I win. He's like, I scored on LeBron James. He's like, I quit basketball. And like LeBron James is physically upset. It's hilarious. And I told you that story because one, I thought it's a great rep. Like people don't get just how good basketball players in the NBA are versus a casual fan. And then your response was, oh yeah, that was a lot like when I scored on Detlef Schrempf. And I was like, whoa. And
Well,
this is, yeah.
it was very similar to the extent that like Detlef Schrempf also wasn't really playing defense at the time. I mean, yeah. I was in a pickup game, so I was a coach at at the Adidas camp that Detlef Schrempf used to do in Germany all the time. This was like probably I'm gonna say this was like 1998 or so, maybe 1999, something like that. I'm not sure. Um, and I think the thing I remember about it, it was before Dirk Nowitzki was drafted. So someone's probably gonna have to check out the timelines or something. So anyway, like the kids would go to bed around 10 o'clock, and then the coaches would all get together and play pickup. And 90% of the time, Detlef was nowhere near. Um, but then this day, he happens to be upstairs, like on the running track above the gym, and he's talking to somebody in America. Um, I know it was America because he was speaking like English, and he says, "Hey, I gotta call you back. I gotta play some ball." So he hangs up and he comes down and he plays pickup ball with us, and we're all just like, "Whoa, we're playing pickup ball with that Liv Shrimp." Yeah, and I don't know. There was like one moment where I got the ball like kind of near the low post, like maybe like 2, 3 feet outside the zone, and you could see like if I had just kind of squared up and taken a perfectly normal shot, even though Detlef Schrempf was like he was way far away. He was like his head was underneath the net, right? Um, and he was like just waiting to like swat my shot into the, and instead, even though he was already like 6 feet away from me, I just did like this ridiculous fadeaway and threw the ball as high as I could in the air, and it went in, and I was like, yes, I just scored on Detlef Schrempf. Even though he was like literally standing more than a human's length away from me at the time.
And again, that was the same case in Trainwreck. And like, I don't know. So another thing I said about Trainwreck, I'd be curious on your thoughts here. We got in an argument last week. Like I said, I actually think I was wrong about Steffi Graf versus Serena Williams, but I think Trainwreck elevates LeBron James over Michael Jordan if we compare Trainwreck to Space Jam.
Yes, I would agree
Yes,
wholeheartedly.
I was amazed. I mean, this movie had some serious acting chops in terms of the comedic talent. Like Amy Schumer and Bill Hader are just two of the funniest people alive. I had an awkward moment with my wife where there's I think it's called Point Place Police Department with Jimmy Fallon and Bill Hader. If you haven't seen this skit, watch it. It's one of the funniest things I've seen. And I was laughing at it and I showed it to my wife and I was like, this is hilarious. And she watched it. She's like, I don't get it. But she did think that Trainwreck was hilarious, so that we got that. But now he held his own. Like the fact that LeBron James is legitimately hilarious in a movie with some really good hilarious talent was amazing to me. And also a shout out to John Cena, who was also pretty hilarious in the
Oh,
movie.
I thought John Cena was the show stealer. He was amazing.
Really? All right.
Yeah.
I put that out. So you're not a big wrestling fan. You're
I'm
not a
not,
big
but he was truly amazing. Like probably the funniest sex scene I've ever seen.
that I agree with that. Well, I'll
I
say is
just love that.
John
Baby, I'm gonna
Cena's.
fill you with my protein. Like,
All right, so but just you don't know wrestling as well, but John Cena's MO in professional wrestling is people kind of hate him because he's too good. Like it's fake, people know that, and they always have him win, so people get sick of it because they're like this. I even put on Twitter the other day, like feels like it's written by a 5-year-old because it's like oh he gets hit in the face and chopped in half, and you're like so he loses, like no he wins, like how does he win? And so what I actually put is Amy Schumer belongs in the WWE because she's like the first person that actually makes you. She makes a legitimate face. That's what they call it in wrestling. Out of John Cena, it was yeah. So and the fact that you call him a show stealer over LeBron James on a basketball podcast during a fantastic performance by LeBron James, that's a major mark for me.
call it like I see it.
And I don't know. I'm trying to think about this. I mean, I just enjoyed the movie and it's the off season.
It's true. We should probably talk more about movies during the off season.
Oh, absolutely. What I was going to say, there's one thing which was interesting, and I'm curious your thoughts. So last week we talked a lot about women's representation in sports, and what I liked about Trainwreck, interestingly, was that basically it took the stereotypical romantic comedy, and it was written by Amy Schumer. Brian pointed out to me, but basically they said, hey, you know that typical male lead of the adult child that kind of needs to grow up, that's always played by a man. What if we had it played by Amy Schumer instead? And it was amazing. It got really good reviews. It's selling pretty well. It was directed by Judd Apatow. So it's like, hey, guess what? You can do a Judd Apatow movie and literally just put a woman in the lead role, and it seems like audiences love it just fine.
Yeah, yeah, agreed.
And I mean,
I think he's made kind of a career of of basically writing the perfectly straightforward formulaic rom-com, but just doing one twist in it. Like I Love You Man, the twist is they're both dudes, and like in Trainwreck the twist is the out of control one is the female, not the male. And it's like that's really the only sort of twist he throws in there. Otherwise he kind of just does it by the numbers.
Yeah, and I mean, actually, that was one of the funny things to me. And I told my wife after, I was like, I really enjoyed it, but some stuff in the movie really bugged me. But I'll just be honest, it's kind of like me yelling, man, that chocolate cake we had really sucked because it had too much cake in it, and it had like cake and icing on it. Like, who does that? It's the stuff that like will bug me, obviously, in the movie. I don't want to give too many spoilers. Like the third act, where in every romantic comedy, they basically dig themselves in a hole that would in the real world have serious repercussions. They get out of it by like one gallant act, and that's always bugged me in romantic comedy. So I'm like, no, that should lose you your job, maybe have you end up in jail. You don't just get out of that. Like, but that, as I said, that's very standard for romantic comedies, where it's like, oh, it didn't happen in this one, but oh, you just jumped security at an airport to show your love, and at the end of it, everybody stands up and claps. It's like, no, TSA tases you. You spend hours in security. The entire airport shuts down. The internet gets mad at you and literally ruins your life with all the angry tweets you get. The person leaves you because they don't want to be around this storm. It's like, yeah, the real world has consequences to gigantic actions that we don't see in romantic comedies.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all I had there. Like I said, I just I enjoyed it, and I like that you liked it, and the fact that when I sent you an email, you responded with an even longer email. I was like, yes, this was a good movie.
Yeah, it was a fun movie. Yeah, I also saw Ant-Man this week, and that was also pretty awesome.
I have not seen Ant-Man yet. My next on my list is Inside Out, so I really want to check that out.
Oh, that's really.
Like I said, my wife talked me into Trainwreck, which wasn't a hard sell. She was like, "You want to see Trainwreck?" I was like, "Which one's that?" I saw the photo. I was like, "Oh, it's the one with LeBron James." And by the way, I gotta give Bill Hader mad props because I can't think of. I want to know how they sold it. He's like, "Hey, LeBron James, I'm gonna say fuck you to you a bunch in this movie," and it just happened. Like, I don't know. I was so impressed by LeBron James. Like, he took his role and went with it. And that's the impressive part. It had two of the biggest athletic faces, John Cena and LeBron James, and they were like, "We're gonna kind of make you be the second tier person to like a geeky white person who's gonna make fun of you. Is that okay?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure."
Yeah.
So anyway, if you're watching this, I say go see Trainwreck. You said Ant-Man is good as well. Don't spoil Inside Out for me, even though I've listened to a bunch of spoilers already, but don't spoil it more. You will
Well,
hear us probably talk more about movies, although we might keep them sports related. Patrick, you got anything else to say about the show before we head to shoutouts?
I don't. I don't even have a shout out today. I'm sorry.
Mine are boring, and I'm sorry, but they earned it. Although actually, I'm gonna steal it and say you gave a shout out to Cena. The fact that you put Cena as the show stealer of that movie, I'm counting that as your shout out. So that
Okay,
qualifies.
that's my
Brian,
shout
you're
out.
Brian. I'm gonna say too, you're still on the hook for a shout out because you never.
Yeah,
have
I'll get a good related shout out in actually, Dre. Is that I've started watching a great web series called Every Frame a Picture. It's done by this guy named Tony Zhao or Tony Zhou maybe. I don't know the pronunciation of his last name. He's actually a local guy here from the Bay Area, and it's just kind of a film nerd. Criticism of film. I highly recommend it. And one of the ones I watched was about how great Edgar Wright is at visual comedy. And the whole piece, he was directly comparing him to Judd Apatow. And he said, well, Judd Apatow's great at writing jokes, but visually he, doesn't quite measure up to Edgar Wright. So there's my film nerd shout out.
By the way, that I agree with that claim, but someone saying that's like saying like they're a pretty good basketball player, but they just don't have the overall skills of LeBron James. The visual skills of Edgar Wright. That is like the most absurd measuring stick to put anybody against. But I'm actually excited about watching it now. All right, my two shout outs are pretty boring, and I think you've already heard them. Dave Barry for his great interview on MSNBC, and I always got to do it. Jonathan Weiler for that great piece on it. On stadiums. I just, he always knocks these things out of the park. And then I'll steal the other one because Patrick got one. I'm going to give it to LeBron James. I was just blown away by his performance. The other funny joke I'll give you, I'll just steal all the funny jokes, is when he comes back for his sunglasses and is like, I'm not giving Sunglass Hut $30 more. I thought that just had me dying. Maybe it wasn't as funny to my wife as me, but I was dying in the theater when I saw that scene.
I didn't think that one was that good.
Really? You didn't think?
Yeah.
I enjoy the fact that Patrick and I both watched the movie and seem to have gotten different enjoyment levels out of it. So I'm comfortable with that, though. All right, so that's been our show. This is the Boxscore Geeks show. If you found us not through our website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. You can support us on iTunes and Stitcher at the Boxscore Geeks show. Subscribe, upvote, definitely helps us out. We have a live video show where Brian Foster adds visuals and shows what we're actually talking about. You may have heard Patrick talking about jerseys that were actually on the screen if you were watching live at twitch.tv/nerdnumbers. And if you missed the live show, you can catch those on YouTube at Nerd Numbers. Thanks again. I've been your host, Andres Alvarez, a.k.a. Nerd Numbers, co-host Patrick Minton, a.k.a. NBA Geek, and produced by Brian Foster, a.k.a. Boxscore Brian. We will see you next week.